Welcome back to another episode of Screen Stories. In this podcast, we'll be discussing the action-adventure game Okami. This is your host, Clare Rivetti. One of the central themes of Okami is faith. We can appreciate Okami as a game easily, but how can we appreciate it as an art form that uses faith to tell its story, especially when faith hasn't been a central part of our lives? Once again, I have my co-host Sky with me, and we're going to be sharing a little bit of our background with faith before we get into things. So, Sky, would you like to start us off?
Hi, Claire. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. Okami's a wonderful game. I'd love to talk about it. Regarding faith, I know that I was in a very religious elementary school, and my mom is very religious, and a lot of people in my family are. But personally, I have had some really unfortunate experiences with religion and faith and whatnot, and it hasn't really been a central part of my life. Unfortunately, a lot of the teaching that I've gotten with religion was much more of like fear mongering and restrictive than actual, like, I don't know, anything that gave me hope or belief or anything like that. And it's really unfortunate. And I've actually started to try and reconnect with religion just a little bit. But like for the majority of my life, it hasn't really been a central part of my life for sure. A lot of that stemmed from just really odd teaching experiences and education and
Right.
just unfortunate stuff like that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think pretty much everything you said also applies to me as well. So I was brought up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. A lot of stuff that I was taught, I agreed with when I was a kid, but then I grew older and I broadened my, experiences and my perspective, and I just kind of realized that a lot of it didn't really sit with how I felt. And there's a lot of, Christian and Catholic teachings that aren't quite how I would feel now. Or, yeah, what you said about fear mongering is pretty close. But I did also grow up in a very religious household, and my dad actually right now is studying to be a deacon. So yeah, we're both pretty much in the same boat there. We
Yeah.
have not the greatest experiences with faith. So I think that's a good thing to establish before we get into talking this game that has a lot to do with faith.
Yeah, because even though like faith isn't her faith and religion isn't a huge part of who Claire and I are as people, it's still a part of like, the lives of people around us, and like we
Right.
respect it, and like, we're not gonna take away from any of that. That's a big part of who you are, and I get that. But it's so wonderful that there's a video game that is not only the foundations of this video game are like religion and spiritualism and stuff like that in Japanese culture, but it's also something that we find so wonderful and endearing and charming. I'd love to talk more about it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Well, now that we've established a bit about our background, let's get into the background of Okami.
Okami.
Okami is a game set in classical Japan, inspired by Japanese mythology and folklore, where you play as the sun goddess Amaterasu, who happens to be a white wolf. This game has a very distinct ink brush-like art style, and the gameplay is modeled after the Legend of Zelda series. It was originally released on the PlayStation 2 in 2006, and was later ported to the Wii, PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. Although it originally had poor sales, it earned IGN's Game of the Year award in 2006, and has a whole host of other awards under its belt, including BAFTA awards for artistic achievement and original score.
I just gotta say, the idea of someone creating a video game that gets achievements for artistic oh my god, what's the word?
Achievement?
Artistic value, or well, an achievement for artistic value and the artistic authenticity of the score and all that. Like, that is just the coolest achievement for a game, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can tell immediately this game has a very clear identity.
Yeah, clear identity, and like it brings about the whole topic of video games as an art form, which is like very empowering for people like us who like video games, you know? It's like, oh yeah, they have like a greater value. It's great.
Right. So, Sky, what can you tell us about the events of the game?
Well, Okami, yeah, like you said, it's a Legend of Zelda. I wouldn't. It kind of emulates the same feel as the game. So you go around in this like big adventure, killing bad guys and going through dungeons and stuff like that. But the game has this. The story is very intriguing. It has a lot of, in my opinion, unexpected twists, and the battle system is very interesting. You play as this white wolf, who is the sun god Amaterasu, and she has the ability to basically turn the screen into a canvas on which you draw on with her tail, which is a brush. So
They call it the celestial brush.
the celestial brush. So like she can draw a horizontal line on the screen and it will like cut a tree in half, or she'll draw a circle with a little fuse coming out of it and a bomb will just spawn right there. Over the course of the game, you get more and more brush techniques, and that's a big part of the story, just trying to, reclaim your original godlike powers.
Right.
And it's not only an explorative technique, but also a battle mechanic. And it's very unique, fighting with guys, and then like you just turn the screen into a canvas and you just like slash through all of them with the brush, and they just like get chopped in half. It's empowering.
It's very unique and it's very fun.
It is very fun. The soundtrack is incredible. The art style is something that we love. Originally the game was going to be rendered in full detailed CG, 3D, whatever, with this detailed white wolf, and they went for this cell shaded look instead because of graphical limitations. But they had these like very bold ink art outlines and everything that kind of instigated the whole idea of the celestial brush, which is pretty cool. And there's a lot of content in there. Boss battles are fun, and the puzzles in the dungeons leading up to them are great. But the main thing that we want to talk about is that the characters are derived from Shinto myth and folktales and Japanese mythology.
Right.
And that's not only really cool because it gives this game an identity that it's like this sort of adaptation of or retelling of or inspired by this like existing mythos, but also it provides a way for players to learn these characters and learn the mythos and know that there's this sort of depth to these characters. They're not just like characters written in a video game. Like, these are timeless stories that are adapted into this really fun adventure game.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's just wonderful how like a lot of aspects of the game are presented as traditional, but like it's still super fun and engaging even for like a kid.
So you've described a lot of the elements of the game as traditional, but how does the game present these traditional elements and still remain interesting and fun?
Yeah, well, personally, I like how you get to learn the mythology really subtly. Every character is in like the rough role that they are in mythology, but they have these quirks that are written in such endearing ways. So, for instance, like the main character, Okami Amaterasu, is based on Amaterasu from Japanese mythology, the sun god. But this sun god, in mythology, she can be portrayed as this like mother goddess, but also like in the first novelization of her, she's just seen as the reason that her brother Susanoo is exiled. But then in a later novel, it focuses on her benevolence. So much like a Avatar in a video game where, they're like a little bit of a, I don't know about blank slate, but like, they don't have these striking personality traits. And like, just like Link in The Legend of Zelda, you can like kind of see yourself in Link because he's like, just like these loose traits that you can kind of relate to. And it's not like this very striking personality. And
they're sort of like a figurehead.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So just like how Amaterasu in mythology is kind of open to interpretation in a sense, Amaterasu in the game, or as everyone calls her, Ami in the game is open to interpretation as well. It's a good way of creating an avatar.
Mm-hmm. Because Ami definitely has some visual reactions to things. She has some good expressions and stuff. And that's always fun to see. But especially because Ami is a white wolf, she never says anything in the game. So there's a lot of interpretation you can put into all of her expressions and lack of expressions in some instances.
Yeah, because there's a lot of examples of games with silent protagonists, but it's just kind of done in a way where they are literally a blank slate. And I think this is one of the best examples of a piece of media with a silent protagonist, where they literally can't talk, they're a dog, but the dog has such expressive, funny quirks, like when her partner is just being annoying and silly and stuff like that. She'll just like eat him really quickly, like, all right, shut up. I just want to know what's going on.
Or she'll completely curl up on the ground and like face away from him and start sleeping. And it's just really funny.
Because it kind of emulates, even if it's not exactly what the player will be thinking, when a character goes on like a rant just gives you a bunch of lore, the game will just go over to Ami and she's just kind of like sleeping, just like yawn. And that does reflect what the player is thinking, even like, right? Even though it's a silent like dog protagonist. It's done very well. It's great storytelling.
Yeah, it's so fun to watch. I've definitely laughed at some of those moments before.
Yeah, she's wonderful. As for her partner, Isun is this like 3-inch long, 3-inch tall, like little creature. Like this little humanoid 3-inch tall little thing, which is, you basically just see Isun for 90% of the game as this little dancing green speck on Ami's head.
Right.
And it, like, you know, he's a wandering warrior and like a poet and whatnot. But Isun is based on the actual tale of Isun Boshi, which is like this whole story about how this old couple was like incapable of having children, so they like prayed to the gods to give them a child, even if he was only like 3 centimeters tall. So the gods gave him a child which would not grow past 3 centimeters tall, but they loved him just like, you know, he was their child. And he wanted to go to the capital but to become a warrior using a bowl as a boat and a chopstick as a paddle and a needle as a sword. And he attempted to save the lady of the house he found employment in from this Oni, or demon, that kidnapped her. The Oni swallowed him up, and he used the needle that he used as a sword to stab at the Oni from inside his body and stuff like that. And the Oni dropped a hammer when Isun defeated the Oni that let him enlarge his body to 6 feet tall so he could marry that lady. Claire, do you want to tell our listeners about what happens in Okami?
Well, funnily enough, there is actually a whole boss battle fought from inside a man, because what happens is, before you fight this battle, you find the hammer that is from the myth, but instead of making you bigger, Ami is already like full-sized, and they use the hammer to shrink her down. So now she and Isun can travel inside this man's body and fight off this blight that he's been afflicted with, and it turns out to be this demon-like thing. So that's really fun, and that is like direct ties to the mythology, even if it's not quite in the same way.
It's adapted.
Yeah, it's still pretty fun, and it's really cool to learn about just the fact that, oh hey, like that's just what happens in the game. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a really cool like example. Yeah, like how you say, like, how does the game present traditional elements but remain interesting? Because like it's like these are just like cool events in a video game, but like they're closer to the mythology than you would think.
Right.
And then like my favorite example, and we'll try to make this quick, Susanoo ni Mikoto, which is Amaterasu's younger brother. In mythology, his portrayal is usually pretty contradictory. He's either like this wild and impetuous ruler of the sea and storms, or he's this heroic figure who killed Yamato no Orochi, which is this like scary snake dragon thing, or a deity linked with agriculture. He's usually like grumpy and destructive, but he's sort of redemptive. How do you create a character like that in like, you know, this fun Zelda-like game and make them like relatable? Well, here's the thing. A lot of the reason why, like, you know, Susanoo as a god cannot like develop as a character is because he's a god and he doesn't have to suffer mortal uh themes of growth and whatnot. So
Right.
in mythology, even though Susanoo started as a god and then got like kicked out of heaven by Amaterasu and eventually found his way back, in Okami, the video game, Susanoo is a human through and through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's very heroic and transformative.
And he's not Amaterasu's younger brother.
No, he's not. Although after they fight together, he does like go like, we're just like brothers, how we fought together. So he kind of like
Yeah.
teases at it,
Which is
But-
adorable.
yeah, like he has these sort of destructive traits in Okami, kind of like the mythology, but it teaches a different lesson. So rather than the mythology saying you need to learn to control your emotions and do services for people who are in need, the game instead says you can be strong and you can fight against such terrifying evils even if you're not the strongest person in the world. If you're brave enough to face your fears, you can tackle any monster, even like accepting the fact that you need this help. So Susanoo's story in the game is amazing as he like wants to prove the gods wrong, that there aren't like gods, and that he's not the descendant of the legendary hero, because he just wants to make something of himself and he doesn't want to just be bound to this expectation of being a hero. But every like piece of danger that he gets himself into, Amaterasu needs to save him, and he keeps going like, oh my god, why do the gods keep toying with me? And it is incredible because it teaches us these like they reduce him to these mortal standards, and like his clumsiness and laziness and doofusness are his own, and that makes him relatable because he has to learn to, one, overcome fear, and two, take responsibility for his own actions,
Right.
which are and these are things like, in the mythology as a god, like, it's not as he's a god, he's above those things at least a little bit, but he has a more human character arc in Okami, even though they tell like loosely the same story. It's really cool, and like the whole idea of I want to break away from my ancestral lineage and become a just my own person, but make him become a better person by finally coming to terms with his ancestral legend. Like, it is wonderful. It's a beautiful story, and he's a fan favorite character for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, he in the beginning he's seen as kind of this bumbling type,
This drunk.
a drunk. Yeah, you don't really take him seriously, but as you go throughout the game and he grows and stuff, you see him as his own person, and you see this growth that he's going through and all the development that he's going through, and he just becomes so beloved. Like you just root for him. You're so proud of him when he gets through all this development and he comes into his own, and it's just so nice to watch.
It's wonderful, especially like when the fight against Orochi, the big 8-headed dragon that the whole game's been teasing you about for so long. It finally happens, and Orochi tries to tease Susanoo and give him dark powers. Don't you want to become Susanoo, warrior? That's like the most powerful thing ever. And Susanoo instead goes, "I am the descendant of Nagi, the greatest warrior that's ever lived."
Which
and
is a complete reversal from when we first meet him.
And it is the most wonderful thing ever. He's a wonderful character, truly.
For sure. My goodness.
So, yeah, like that's probably the single best example of how Okami, like it does tell a traditional story, and it does it through all of these like, very traditional old characters and whatnot, these folk tales really. But like it examines these characters under the lens of this like really fun story with really human qualities. That's how they humanize Susanoo, make him understandable, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. And I can't let this conversation end without also mentioning there's a character that I especially really enjoy, whose name is Waka. And Waka is, unlike Isun and Susanoo, Waka is actually based on a real person who I believe was a general.
A
and
16th century Japanese general, a war hero of sorts. Yeah.
Exactly. And this just hearing that by itself, normally I would be kind of like rolling my eyes like, okay, a general, cool. Whatever.
Yeah.
But you meet Waka in the game, and he's just this bizarre, fun but bizarre character who kind of comes out of nowhere. And at first, I mean, every time this guy came on screen, I would like roll my eyes.
Oh, hello, I have a prophecy for you, ma chérie.
Yeah, and that's how he talks. He's French for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as the game goes on and as the story continues, he ends up having this really human arc to him, and it's kind of revealed that he is almost directly responsible for all of the darkness and the monsters that are swallowing up the land, and he feels this sense of responsibility, and he's been for like hundreds of years trying to right the wrongs that have been committed because of a mistake that he made. And it's through those small actions that you get to know about like it has this element of traditional history to it, but it also becomes more about him as a character and as a person, and it draws you into the story, and it makes you it just really makes you feel for him. And I really love his example from the games, because literally, as I said, from the beginning, I would roll my eyes every time he came on screen because he's so extra. But then he just becomes so beloved. And by the end, I was just I was sold. He's
the favorite. He's the best
my favorite.
character.
Yeah, he's the favorite.
He's wonderful. So like if on like this Screen Stories podcast we want to highlight parts of games that, you know, like take storytelling and really give it a very human element that the players can connect with, really great job done by Okami for taking both folklore characters like Isu and mythological characters like Susanoo, or real-life historical figures like Ushiwaka, and turning them, well, not even changing them, but like taking the most significant parts of their identities and humanizing them in different ways that just makes them so endearing, and to the point where like it's basically like, oh, it's basically its own story, but also it's connected to mythology. And by playing Okami, it's like, oh, now I know mythology. But I just went through this whole traditional story, but it was so engaging and fun. Like, yeah, it's wonderful. Great. Well, wonderfully done.
You know, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you just kind of end up feeling like all these characters they're kind of like a family, you know?
Yeah, that's the best thing. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very humanized and they're very relatable, and yeah, it's just one of the better games at like you said, at humanizing everyone and giving you a reason to care, not just about the history or the mythology, but just to care about the story that Okami itself is telling.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we wrapped that up quite nicely. So, guys, we'll be right back with more Screen Stories after this quick break. Do your Waka voice again.
I have a prophecy for you, ma chérie.
Yep, that's him. That's the character.
Very well done. Welcome back to the podcast. Indeed.
Surprise! It was me all along.
Surprise! It was me behind the microphone, telling the stories of the screens. Oh, indeed. Au revoir, ma chérie.
Welcome back. Now we're going to be taking a closer look at the role faith plays in Okami. I want to start off by talking about Okami's praise. One of the things you can do while you play as Ami is to accrue praise, which allows you to upgrade your health bar, coin purse, inkwells, and other gameplay features. The way you accrue praise is through a couple different ways. You can feed the animals you come across on your journey, help various plants to bloom, and finally, you help the people around you with their problems. In doing these things, you inspire the plants and the animals and the people to believe in the gods once again, and that's when you receive their praise. So, Sky, I want to ask you, how does Okami's praise system factor into its storytelling?
So obviously we've already talked about how like mythology and like spiritualism and all that is all connected to the narrative themes of this game. But one central point of the whole game is just the idea of belief in the gods and that they got your back. So one of the wonderful things is like, whenever Amaterasu goes around fulfilling side quests and helping people out and getting them the things they need or fending them off from demons and whatnot, them handing you praise is a reward, which is like, like 50 units of praise, 30 units of praise or whatever. And like, as a gameplay mechanic, you used it to like upgrade your health bars and stuff like that, which is really clever. The idea that you're doing things for people so that they can give you praise so that you are made stronger through the belief of people like believing in you.
Power up.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a cool way to connect game and story and like, narrative theming. I think one of the best examples of this is there's these two sisters, Camille and Camellia. And these sisters, the younger one believes in the gods, and like when she sees Ami's a white wolf, but she has these red markings on her across her whole body, which like, is symbolized as her godlike status. And only people who believe in the gods can see those markings. So when you talk to the older sister, she doesn't see the markings and she's like, oh, what a nice wolf. But the younger sister is like, oh, look at those red markings. And like, you're so cool. And the older sister's like, I don't see that. And over the course of the game, you learn that, oh, that means like, these people actually believe and these people don't. So the older sister is just like so like passive and dismissive, like, oh, there's no such thing. It's because of our hard work and stuff like that. Or like, oh, the bad things happening are just like, fate and crap. But like she'll say like, I mean, it'd only be a miracle if like, it started raining on our crops again or anything like that, but that wouldn't happen. So you can use the celestial brush to make it rain. And all of a sudden, the younger sister will be like, look at that, it's because you asked the gods. And the older sister will be like, nah, that's crazy. And there are several times in the games where you see these sisters and you do little things like that to help the older sister believe in the gods until eventually she believes. And she all of a sudden goes, oh my gosh, I can see the red markings too. And the side quest ends and she gives you praise. She praises you because she believes in you, and that empowers you. I love how that is connected. The narrative theme and the story and the gameplay. It just all seamlessly blends together.
Right. I think that is one of the best examples of it. I also really love the fact that I believe you did mention that Susanoo could see the markings earlier. But when you first meet Susanoo, there's no indication of that. And like I mentioned earlier, he is seen as kind of this drunk, bumbling type of person. And he's like resisting his fate, resisting the fact that he was a descendant of this great hero and all that. And then as he grows and as you go through the game, suddenly he mentions, oh, like, you think I forget what exactly he says, but he says something almost dismissive that makes you realize, oh my gosh, he can see the markings. He's been able to see them this whole time. And it just lends this extra layer to all of his actions and stuff. And it's just so cool.
It's so cool, and it's not, like, contradictory either. Like, you would think at first, like, that doesn't make any sense. His whole character is about dismissing the gods. But you think about it, it's like, not really. His whole character is that he's hyper-aware of the gods, and that he's, like, frustrated that it seems like the gods are toying with them. And he wants to dismiss the notion that gods are, such a part of his whole identity and legacy because he just wants to be his own person. And his acceptance of that is a big part of his character. But like when you realize you could see the markings the whole time, oh well, that when you think about it, that makes sense. And yeah, the extra layer it adds to them is just incredible. Like wow,
It
it's
makes
wonderful.
perfect sense, but it's something that you just it's such a big realization when it happens. Like for
Hmm.
me at least, I was just like, "Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
hello."
It's a great storytelling moment, really. It's a
Yeah.
very subtle. It's a really subtle moment on its own, right? Like, oh yeah, I could see the markings the whole time. But it's like when you think about it, it's not just a little like cheap twist. Like, oh, that's cool. Like it actually like lends so much to his character. Just that little piece of dialogue. Really
Mhm.
cool.
And as for the praise system itself, I love how you said it seamlessly blends everything together because that is exactly how it feels. Um I mean, even just from small things as like feeding animals and stuff, just
Oh my
that in
gosh,
itself
yeah.
just helps you power up. It helps you to like bring the land a little closer to its redemption or like its freedom from the darkness that it's been plagued by. And it's just such a
Yeah.
cool thing, you know? It and also the fact of there being animals that gives you praise, I think is pretty cool because it also has this narrative about like nature and stuff being
Mhm.
being a part of everything. Um
Yeah, that's a good point because the game also has this loose theme near the end of nature versus machines. So
right.
it's really nice that like you give like a little bits of meat and fish to all the animals around, and they give you praise to help empower you. It's wonderful, and that's a good point. It's a really good
Mhm.
point.
And it's adorable. It's just really fun and cute to find animals around and just be like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna feed you.
yeah, it really is.
So, we've talked about praise and how praise has to do with the people and the animals and their faith in the gods. I want to ask, how is the concept of faith presented in such a way that even those of us with very little connection to faith can appreciate?
I think a lot of what we were talking about kind of illustrates that point. A lot of what we were talking about is how they take these all of these really grand stories, but they humanize them in a way through twisting certain elements of their story and making characters mortal or making their struggles down to earth or stuff like that. Making like yeah, like just a lot of moments with a lot of personality that lead us to really connect with them personally. In real life, I think our connection to faith is connected to bad experiences with religion and like religious authority figures and restrictions that authority figures place on us and stuff like that. Stuff that doesn't feel authentically human the way that this game's storytelling can sometimes come across. In Okami, it's presented in a very authentic, primal, and honest way, telling a story that's where faith is purely about hope
Hmm.
or in the case of characters like Susano, it's just like accepting higher assistance in a way,
Hmm.
accepting the help of someone greater than you. Um, in real life, I think a lot of the ways that people our age find comfort in religion and faith is just in the acceptance of I mean just comfort in a higher power that's there for you.
Hmm.
Um, and while like again like I said I want to like reconnect with my religion in a way because that is something that I want in my life. I want to be able to know that there's a higher power that is there for me. um and I think that's something that in Okami, you playing as that like sun god and having the power to go around and actually like make these like improve the lives of all of these people, that's something that resonates with everybody, but told under the lens of like, like Shintoism and like folklores from like ancient Japan and stuff like that. It's a human story, but it's just kind of like taking elements from mythology, and it's just a wonderful blend of both.
Yeah.
Um yeah.
I would also say one of my favorite moments that kind of has to do with my question is, spoiler alert, but towards the end, when you're fighting this
Oh man.
final battle, what happens is Isun actually is not with Ami. Ami is on the ship fighting this final big bad guy. And Isun can't be there physically to help Ami. And what happens is the big final boss is very powerful, and there is a moment where it looks like Ami is going to lose. Ami,
Yeah, rips away all of Ami's godlike powers that she
yes,
got over the course of the
Ami
game.
has lost all of her powers, and is basically like a normal white wolf who's been beaten and, is on her last legs trying to resist. And because Ami is the sun god, actually things go dark.
Yeah, oh man. Yeah, there's no light in the sky or anything. It is crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's a very powerful moment. And what ends up happening is Isun down, off the ship with all of the people that you've met throughout the game. Isun decides to take all of the experiences that he's had with Ami, and he puts them on scrolls. He writes down their story and he draws out their story, and he distributes these scrolls to everyone in an effort to get them to believe in Ami again.
Yeah, he draws Ami like a depiction of the great sun god whose benevolence improved the land through the players' actions. And the game shows you all of these characters who you improved the lives of through, just like little things. But like just Isun finally accepts his role as a celestial envoy of sorts and helps spread the word that like, hey, without Amaterasu, like, crops won't grow, rain won't fall, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And it's just this really emotional moment where Isun is asking everyone to believe in Ami and to put their faith in Ami and to say out loud, that they believe in her. And it reminds me of the moment in, I think it's like the Peter Pan play, where the audience is asked, do you believe in fairies? Like, clap if you believe in fairies. That's what it feels like, because Isun is asking all these people to come together to give Ami the support that she needs. And in doing so, she regains some of her power. And through their faith and through their hope, and then through the actions that she can now take because she has that faith, she is able to turn the tables on this big bad boss, and she defeats him and she saves the day. She saves everyone. She saves the world, basically.
It's beautiful, and like she's finally returned to who she supposedly was 100 years ago at the prime of her power. She has these like beautiful white glow around her, and then you draw a circle in the sky and the sun just shines on the bad guy, and it's an incredible moment.
Yes, it is wonderful. And I think, to me, a lot of my understanding with the game and with its emphasis on faith and stuff was kind of, I found a more personal connection with it because of that moment. Because, as we were saying in the beginning, religion isn't very prevalent in our lives and stuff. But through that moment, through everything that Isun did, and through them all believing in Ami, I was able to make the connection of faith kind of having to do with loyalty and with hope. And that was what helped me to really understand, not only just in the context of this game, what faith meant, but also just outside in general, what the meaning that faith has to people. So it was a really cool way for me to experience kind of another point of view. And I don't think I could have made that connection if it wasn't for the game and it wasn't for the events they showed. So I just think that the way they went about it was really, really cool. And I was able to make a connection that I didn't have before, specifically because of this game.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely beautiful. I love the way you worded that. I love though how you said loyalty and hope, because it draws to mind the idea of why did they decide to make Amaterasu a dog in this game?
Uh-huh.
But I think a lot of people think of loyalty and hope when they picture a dog.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's a great connection. I'm glad I love the way you put that.
Yeah, loyalty and hope, and I think innate goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that.
Mhm. I mean, Ami, everything that Ami does, Ami certainly doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But still, like,
she'll show attitude, right?
yeah, she'll do it. She has a little bit of spunk to it, but she'll do it.
Yeah.
And it's just it just makes you think. It just makes you think about the, like I said, the innate goodness in the world. And I think especially the fact that she's portrayed as a dog, specifically a wolf, but a dog.
Yeah.
It just really helps with that. I mean, I definitely feel like they made so many good choices, and that was one of them, and that was something that really helped me connect with Ami. So, yeah. I mean, if it had just been this humanoid figure,
Right.
I don't think I would have been as attached to her. And I don't think I would have been as attached to, like, the good things that she does, and I don't think I would have rooted for her as much as I did. But, like, it's a good way to kind of revert your expectations.
Yeah. I mean, like, hey, nothing against humans, right? We like humans.
Right.
But, like, there's this certain element of, like, connotation, right?
Exactly.
And I think the connotation is much stronger when you just have, like, a literal dog just going around and, like, being so, like, loyal and helpful and devoted towards just pure goodness and wanting to spread just all of this positivity and welfare. Welfare is a big one. Wanting to promote welfare in people who have become grumpy and jaded and stuff like that. That's just a universal human theme that doesn't need to have any connection to religion, spiritualism, or anything like that. But the fact that this game draws this connection so seamlessly, and it's just so well executed, because these are truly human universal themes that are told under this like, religious, like, spiritual connotation. But it's done in such a great way. And I'm like, and even if you're not if religion isn't an active part of your life, like with Claire and myself, yeah, that won't take away from any part of your experience playing Okami, because the freaking fighting is sick. And, like, the fights are sick. The bosses are awesome. The castles that you have to storm are just outstanding.
Yeah.
Like, oh man.
And what's more, you can appreciate the story without having that, as a part of your life. I think just hearing about this game without knowing anything about it would have, like, turned me off completely from playing it. But the way they go about it is so universal,
Yeah, and none of those factors take away from the other factors. The gameplay, the narrative elements, like, they're very seamless, and that is incredibly difficult to do in a video game.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there have been multiple sources, like video game magazines and stuff like that have considered this, like, one of the best games of all time. And I think that's pretty spot on. It's pretty high up there.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.
So now that we've mentioned all of that, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I just wanted to say, like, if any of what we just went through sounded appealing to you guys, just know that this game has been re-released over and over again since 2006. It is on all major platforms, as we said before, and there's a sequel on the DS, which is harder to get your hands on, but you play as Ami's little pup son, Chibitarasu. It's adorable. And these are just like such wonderful, beloved games. And like there are so many ways to get into them, regardless of like even if you don't have a gaming console, you can play it on your computer if you have a Steam account. And I highly recommend that you do, because it is just, I mean, hey, I agree with those magazines. It's one of the greatest games ever made. If like it's too good. It's wonderful.
I would definitely agree there, let me tell you. We really hope that you guys enjoyed this podcast on Okami. If you'd like to try the game out for yourself, as we mentioned, it's available on all major platforms. Do you believe in Ami? Let us know. I've been your host, researcher, and editor, Clare Rivetti, and I want to thank Sky here for joining me on this podcast. We hope you tune in next time on Screen Stories.